Kwingineko, mhasibu mkuu Nancy Gathungu anahojiwa na kamati ya uhasibu ya bunge la seneti kuhusu matumizi ya fedha za serikali. Hebu tusikize yanayojiri.
Promoters, where the national government is paying 50% stipend and the county is paying 50% stipend. That arrangement is creating a lot of problems in counties. As we are speaking now, most counties have not paid the stipend for 4 months, largely because of delays from the national government. Now, this particular money from the national government was approved by the Senate. But to date, you're having scenarios where CHPs have not been paid because of that delays by the national government and the county government. I don't know whether you have picked that as one of areas of concern in this performance audit.
Chair.
You want to write on that?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make a comment.
Okay, please.
I think it's an important comment. The rider can ride on that other one afterwards, but Senator Agenda can ride on that one. But for me, there is something that we explored here, auditor, and I've been trying to explore because it was an important question that Senator Akina brought. We are trying to look at a way of actually being able to make your work easier. So we were pondering the issue of amending the PFM Act to make sure that we can probably have a rolling basis kind of delivery of reports, so that there is a consolidation at the end of the year. But during that conversation, a very eminent issue was raised on people who are collecting money on behalf of the counties. And I think the indication that we gave that the ultimate accountability framework that exists currently is on the Treasury is an important one, but actually it is actually wrong. Because Section 165 of the PFM Act, and you can guide me whether the language used there refers to the people who are collecting revenue for the people on behalf of county government. So I'm going to read it entirely, because if indeed it is true that it is of the same understanding, then I think that we must be able to work together with you to hold those receivers of money very accountable. So Section 165, Auditor of the PFM Act, talks about the annual reporting by receivers of revenue. And it says, at the end of each financial year, a receiver of revenue for a county government shall, mark my word there, a receiver of revenue for a county government shall prepare account in respect of the revenue collected, received, and recovered by the receiver during that financial year. Section 165(2) says the account under Section 1 shall include a statement of receipts and disbursements in a form prescribed by the Accounting Standards Board from time to time, which is what you have been referring to in terms of the Public Accounting Standards Board, and a statement of arrears of revenue. 3, not later than 3 months, this is the part I was looking for, not later than 3 months after the end of the financial year, the receiver of revenue for the county government shall submit the accounts to the Auditor General and deliver a copy to the National Treasury, which is where we are focusing on, the Controller of Budget, County Treasury, and the Commission on Revenue Allocation. Not later than 2 months after the end of each financial year, a receiver of revenue for the county government shall submit to a county assembly a full report with respect to all waivers and variations of taxes, fees, or even charges granted by the receiver during that year. But I won't read all of it, but I wanted to just read the relevant part. Actually, these people are supposed to be able to give the Auditor General reports 3 months after the delivery of the financial year. So I think we wanted to amend what already exists, and I think that is just a misnomer that the Auditor General must be able to point out and take note. I don't know whether it's the same language or you can help me see the understanding of that particular provision of law.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, before the auditor responds to that, who is the receiver? Is it as per Section 157 of the PFM Act, receiver and collectors of county government revenue? So there is a receiver who is designated by the CCM Finance. Is that receiver the same as a collector? And Section 164 that my colleague, is it 164? 167? 165 that my colleague has read. Auditor, if I'm to take it word for word, it means that apart from the county treasurer, who is the head of the treasury, it means that you will be receiving then document directly from the receiver of the revenue, who has been designated by the county treasury. So, when you are responding to that query, look at 157 and 165. Those two.
Okay, maybe.
Thank you.
Auditor General, if you could listen to me, you have set out 4 areas where you have said, which you've identified as relevant topics for audit. Now, one of the areas you've set out, Auditor, is the area of management of solid waste in cities. I presume or I know that all cities or all counties have companies that run water and sewage. Maybe you tell us, I'm sure there are other entities that have been contracted or that exist either as companies or as entities that manage some of these services, sewage services, and maybe that had escaped the audit net before. So that's an important point. Now, I think on CHPs is quite straight. The shared responsibility. Though health is devolved under Schedule 4, there's a shared obligation on the part of CHPs under the framework that we have, the Social Health Act. Now, let me just ask another question. On riparian land, maybe you want to tell us whether there are also other entities that some counties have designated to deal with certain services and that collect revenue on behalf of counties and that have also escaped the audit net for a while. I do not know, and I'm just asking, because there are areas you've singled out. Are there any other areas, this is my question, where counties have used companies to render services and or collect revenue, and that in the course of your audit cycle you have discovered that this committee should take concerns about, because there are those outlier areas that counties cleverly are able to use as vehicles that are used to collect revenue and that would often escape your audit judgment. Thank you.
Yeah. The auditor, you have so many matters now. Proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I actually did not want Senator Olekina to ask that question because I knew we'll get into a debate of definitions. But indeed, there is a difference between the collectors as procured by the counties as service providers and the receivers as designated as public officials who prepare receiver of revenue statements. And I do issue to the Senate the receiver of revenue statements for each receiver. The challenge has been, have the collectors been remitting the correct revenue to the receivers in the first place? So we want to extend that audit and see how can we follow up beyond that. So there is that difference. This one purely speaks to the designated receivers within an entity. The same way for national government, KRA is the designated receiver of revenue, and then we have other entities that receive like immigration and other ministries that have the other revenue streams, and we prepare different certificates for these revenue streams. The issues that I raised on the special audits or the performance audits, these are topical issues that we pick within the office. I normally have a long list that at the beginning of every financial year, the team from specialized audits give to me for approval, based on scanning the environment. What are the topical issues that are being discussed by the citizens? What are the issues being discussed in Parliament and by other stakeholders? What are the issues being raised by the media? And we pick topics. So these are topics that we have picked for this year. Remember, a performance audit is a study. It's almost like a research, and it takes a bit of a while. You will not get a performance audit done in under 9 months or 8 months at most, because we go beyond the financial issues and we look at effectiveness, we look at efficiency, we look at economy and provision of services, we look at issues to do with equity, and we look at sustainability. So these are the issues that we have selected. And it is easier to start with cities so that I have a small team that will look at environmental issues concerning management of waste. And then now later we can cascade that based on the learning curve to the other entities. But that does not mean that we do not raise sometimes paragraphs on these matters in the financial statements. But it's going beyond and looking at it holistically and asking ourselves, is it providing the services as required a certain area, including the medical? I think that was it. Yes, Honourable Chair.
Okay.
Maybe just before, and I've just noted this also with our Secretariat. I'm wondering, Madam Auditor General, which PFM Act do you use? Do you use the 2012 or do you use the amended one? Because I've just realized here we don't have the amended one. Huh? You know, when they carry out these miscellaneous amendments, like the one I wrote about today in the dailies, do you use that? Because I don't want to mix issues here, because I would have another question to ask you. Because I mean, I'm just saying we have the 2012 here, but it's not the one that is in use by the Auditor General. Or do you use this one?
Honourable Chair, the anchor PFM law is the PFM 2012, and then any subsequent amendments becomes part of the criteria that we use to measure against performance. So all amendments are taken into consideration whenever they recur, because they are now the latest. So you have the PFM Act 2012, and then you look at the specific paragraphs or areas or sections of the law that have been amended, and they are the ones that are applicable at that point in time.
I think that the question is, are you aware that we have old law with us?
And also, so you use...
How is she supposed to answer?
So you use the 2012 as amended, correct?
Yeah.
Because the reason I'm asking you that is, I know the law requires you to audit the consolidated fund, the county revenue fund, and this other one called what? The equalization fund. But what happens when we have a law in this country that calls for money to be paid directly to suppliers? Do you get to audit that when loans are taken? If you read the amendment number 6 of 2014 of the PFM Act, which amended, I believe, section 52, do you audit that? Maybe I can read for you the amendment in a second here.
As you read out, members just note that we are done with this report.
Yes.
We have gone to the last page. So any other issue you are raising is not in this report. But since the auditor is a very rare person to find,
we might ask the same.
You may ask questions.
So I'm just looking
those
at
your questions.
Section 50. I don't know whether you audit, because back in 2014, March 26th of 2014, the PFM Act was amended and Section 50 was amended. I believe even, I think 50 and 52 actually. I believe in even the number one, what number are you? number 344 ODM member, does not even know this. So it says, Section 50 of the Principal Act is amended by deleting Section 7, where it gives the Cabinet Secretary powers to do the following: disperse directly to the supplier where the loans is raised for the purpose of financing goods and services provided by a supplier outside Kenya, or, in the case of an external loan or external government security, applied in part to pay at closing expenses associated with the borrowing, including but not limited to the fees, commissions, and expenses of lenders, financial arrangers, brokers, managers, book runners, fiscal agent, trustees, paying agent, exchange. Do you get to audit this? Because this is where we found ourselves, where we've taken a lot of loans and they are not audited by you.
That's an extra question.
It's an extra question.
Yeah.
And I actually, there was a disclaimer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I think the Honourable Member is asking whether we audit public debt. We do audit public debt, and you have seen our reports in the public domain. Indeed, they were quite prominent in the media, both socio and mainstream media.
That is not my question.
But no, let me go to your question now, because you asked, do we audit? Now, if you look at this amendment you're speaking to, the date of commencement is 2nd November 2023. So I expect that as we are auditing 23-24 financial year, this now becomes a criteria for audit. So my staff are looking at these issues, and you'll be given reports on this.
So does that mean as from 20, because this is actually very clear, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to ask this question. Does that mean as from 2014 to 2023 November, there is no money that has been borrowed and paid directly to suppliers by the Cabinet Secretary of Treasury? Because you say the commencement is from November 23rd of 2023. I'm just asking out of curiosity.
Chair, I would have to look at the agreements for every borrowing or loan on what are the terms. Because you have some loans where the terms are that the people who are either providing a service or coming to either implement a program, the monies will be paid into their countries. So that will depend on a case-by-case basis. I know the issue that I've recently been raising, and that may open another Pandora's box, is once a project has been implemented, and this is a directive I've given my staff to pursue, what do we do with the assets that came on board? Are they being re-exported? If they're being re-exported, how are we accounting for that? Are they being utilized within the country? Then who is taking them on board? I'm just digressing. But as I said, it goes on a case-by-case basis. So I cannot say no, I cannot say yes, unless we go to the nitty-gritty of each of those agreements.
No, he's also asking whether GNDs have read the report. It's a different question.
Net agenda, what have you eaten today?
And these don't read those reports.
And maybe let me just inform this committee that we are currently finalizing the plan for the special audit on public debt. So it will raise some of these issues, which are also part of the terms of reference that the senator is raising. So it's going to be a very comprehensive audit of public debt.
Yeah. So I think any member with an extra question?
No.
Yeah.
No, I think before you say no, Auditor, I'm not very convinced with your last statement when it comes to the issue of auditing revenue collectors. And I know my colleague read the issue of the receiver, but I think you alluded to the fact that since it is public money that they're collecting, then they'll need to be audited. Should I conclude by saying that, based on our discussion here, you're going to issue a memo or maybe a circular to counties and tell them that you will also be auditing the collectors? just to be able to ensure that whatever is being deposited in the county revenue fund is indeed what has been collected. And to a large extent also, counties are now also procuring debt collectors. So these debt collectors who are being procured by counties, how is the arrangement? Do you treat it the same way as envisioned by Section 109 of the PFM Act, Article 207 of the Constitution, where all the money is deposited and then the revenue collectors are paid? Or do you allow the revenue collectors who maybe expend out the money to pay lawyers, to do all these things, to cut out their expenses and then remit whatever they are collecting to the counties? And would you be able to audit that? Because there are so many loopholes when it comes to the issue of management of public, especially onsos and also public money, that if you don't think outside the box and try to look at all those places, then you will not be able to, you'll just be giving us figures, but I'm sure those people who are collecting and reporting will just be laughing and saying, it's just giving us what we know. You know, and then finally, and this is another area that I may want, and you know you and I always have these conversations in details. Finally, KRA collects revenue. Other agencies collect revenue. Counties collect revenue. Do all these figures match with proportion? Like, for instance, if you go to a county that has got tourism activities, there's a levy, which is a catering levy, that is a percentage of the occupancy or whatever the hotel sells. Do you audit that figure and then create a nexus with the revenue collected by the counties and also the revenue collected by KRA like VAT to see who is not telling the truth? I don't know whether you see how I'm trying to create a nexus between the three revenue sources. Because ultimately, if we were to be very clear and say, we have the catering levy, which is 2%, we have the VAT, which is 16%, and then we have a fee charged by a county for bed nights, we will then be able to be accurate when it comes to the issue of our revenue, on-source revenue collections. And we'll be able to close the loopholes that are created by these external collectors and the county governments being in colluding with each other.
Chair, I know we are about to finish, but there's a very important question that I wanted to ask. But before I ask, I think that on this issue of collectors, that was being very deliberate in Section 165, I think that auditor, we should be a tag team on this. And the reason I say we should be a tag team on this, because I think that we need to actually sponsor a very serious amendment that is very prescriptive on this. Because if you leave it to the auditor on the pretext of you must audit all the public funds, then I can see service providers starting to bring excuses with regards even to IP laws, data protection laws on their sides, that then becomes prohibitive to audit. We saw this even in an unrelated issue during elections, when Smartmatic was being asked, the data that you own for Kenya, why can't you be able to provide it? And then Smartmatic will be like, no, you cannot access it because you've got protected data that is not available to you as a country, that affects other clients that we have that we might not be able to bring. So I think that there needs to be a very prescriptive law that even deals with those other underwriting issues that need to be done. But so that's a different conversation that we can all have, and it's very clear from my mind where I see what we need to amend. But it's a tag team. We will reach out to your office to see what we can be able to do. But my question, which has been a very emotive question for governors, especially if you think about public scrutiny, where social media is very strong, in the number of accounts that are run by counties in terms of service provision. You know, you find that So County X is doing the same number of services, but only running 10 accounts. County Y is running the same services and providing the same services for their counties, but has got 200 accounts. Can you comment on what is the efficient number of accounts that counties should run? And is it an issue that also emanates in your audit process in terms of just efficient way of being able to show Kenyans how much money are counties spending, but also are there potential for leakages in cases where counties are running multiple accounts for very specific services that they're providing for their people? Because this has been a very serious issue that is emanating in this committee, and we don't know that to excuse it. Will you advise the committee to be able to think about reducing the number of accounts as much as possible, where probably like the executive is giving, for instance, or some hospitals funding? Should there be an autonomous accounting account for it, or should it just be under CRF? So that's an issue that I think that needs to be cleared for us to be able to know how we face it.
Yeah, I'll allow Auditor General to respond to those two issues, and then I will ask my last question.
Thank you, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, for the comments, the concerns, and the questions. Honourable Chair, the one thing I would request this committee to pay attention to in the audit reports are the two sections of the audit report that don't directly relate to the audit opinion, because the committees sort of get embroiled in the audit opinion and issues affecting financial statements, and you miss out on critical issues that could be 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 pages on matters to do with the value for money, matters to do with the effectiveness and lawfulness in the use of resources, and matters to do with risk management, governance, and internal controls. And some of these issues, if they were addressed adequately, would sort out some of the issues that the members are raising. Because in there, you'll see the challenges I raise in terms of accountability and in terms of risk. Senator Olikina is talking about all the types of analysis we can do on data. And even analyzing revenue across the country would be a very good analysis, which we can work with even National Treasury and other stakeholders. If you look at some of the reports I issue on revenue collections or revenue funds, you will see the issues raised. And I think I also issued a consolidated report on the county revenue funds. You'll see that issues cutting across. And those are the issues I would wish this committee to look at in depth, so that you don't get lost in the nitty-gritties in the financial statements. How was the statement done? How was the what do we call it? The template prepared. But you look at what affects service delivery, what affects development. So I take that into advisement that we can do as many, it's like doing statistics. And you can, the term, you can go to town with statistics and actually be able to draw some inference based on maybe graphs or correlations on revenue. So that is something we can see. Does it add value? Does it give information for decision making? And we can work on that. But that would come in probably after the end of auditing. And then we consolidate, and then we run these graphs. And you'll see them even in the summary reports. We do quite a number of graphs that can be of assistance to you. Even looking at percentages, how much is Kenya Revenue collecting vis-a-vis other revenue agencies? Should we consolidate? Why is it that this year this agency collected 2 billion and this year it has gone to 1.6 billion with no explanation? Is it siphoning? Or has something happened in the economy, or that particular service, has it not been provided? So those kind of scenarios can be run. Yes, working together, very, very critical in terms of public scrutiny. Indeed, we are required to work together because the Constitution says I must audit and submit my report to Parliament, and you must consider and give recommendations. That is the part I am really emphasizing on, that once I do my report, the committees look at it, give their report, and Parliament now approves that report, and those are the key recommendations that may affect future, that could be interventions for improvements. Bank accounts, apart from the requests or the requirements by development partners when they issue funds for a separate bank account, I think we should minimize bank accounts. We should have 1 or 2 revenue accounts, their expenditure accounts. We don't need 300. First of all, you lose track. You put money there. Sometimes you forget that there is money there, and then you come and in some of my reports, you'll see where there's reallocations from this account to another account, and it was set up for a fund, which now brings me to my biggest problem concerning counties, that the law gives counties a blank check on how many funds they can establish. So sooner than later, we'll have more funds in this country that are running operations of departments of counties. So you'll have a fund for agriculture, and you have the department for agriculture. You have a fund for gender, and you have a department for gender. Then you have duplication of funds at the national level, also at the county level. You've seen counties now have established bursaries, and they're giving bursaries to secondary schools, and I thought secondary schools education is under national government. So now you have a problem, and I'm very glad that we're having a national conversation now on affordable education and how to minimize all these bursaries. They are quite a number. So I cannot say that 2 are enough or 3 are enough. It will depend on the situation, but more than 10, it's too much. So 300 don't make sense to me, or even 200. And we have data on that, and I think in one of my summary reports I did issue. They do not need. Even reconciliations are never done. There's commingling of funds because a fund is set up for a specific purpose. When they run out of funds in a certain area, now they go and withdraw from that particular fund. So there's commingling, misallocations, reallocations, and even the financial statements. I end up querying most of those financial statements.
Just for clarity on this issue of bank accounts, because, you know, Migori County, where I come from, I think you've got more than 200 bank accounts. Oh. And that's why I'm very keen on this bank accounts issue. In your audit process, do you audit all the bank accounts, or do you audit based on a mother presentation on the financial statements? I'm very, very keen on this. Do you actually require the auditing of all those bank accounts, or if it's a functional account whereby probably like is giving service to a major ticket, do you just look at the vote vis-a-vis the financial statement, or do you go to these bank accounts as well as a verification indices for them? Because it's a very critical part of why there could be siphoning or leakages of public funds. So the first part is answered well, that we don't need more than 10 bank accounts, in running services in the counties, which is something that we should follow in as a committee and narrow it down. And I hope that the chair, you can take note on this, because some governors were trying to justify why you must have more than 200 accounts for efficiency and effectiveness. But on the other side is the audit question. So as an auditor, do you actually delve into those accounts?
Thank you, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members. There are specific audit procedures for bank and cash and bank audits or balances. So these take care of all those bank accounts. We look at reconciliations. We do third-party confirmations, sometimes on bank certificates. We look at the bank statements, and then we follow through on the expenditures from those accounts. And that's why you find I raise issues on commingling of funds, or the accounts not being utilized for the specific purpose. Or sometimes you'll find a dormant account in 1 year or for 2-3 years, and then suddenly it receives money, The money comes in and goes out. So we follow and we find, no, it was a vehicle to put aside. Yeah, I think you also understand.
Are you trying to say a vehicle for eating?
But just on my last question, Mr. Chairman, if you allow me, you've raised two very important issues here. One issue is on the danger of leaving the law as it is to allow counties to set up funds. Do you then recommend to this committee that we should look into amending the law, the PFM Act? I think it's section 116, if I'm not wrong, on setting up funds, to limit the funds. So that's the first question. And then query number two, we have had this discussion about the IFMIS system. We've had this discussion about the IB in terms of the payment system. Right now, the Senate passed a resolution that all counties must pay at minimum $1 billion by the end of the last financial year. What are your views in terms of trying to streamline and to reduce this issue of pending bills? Should we continue entertaining this discussion of having an end-to-end IFMIS system, which essentially makes it very difficult and denies the county treasury the luxury of changing at the last minute who gets paid? So such that if you input a transaction, that transaction will end up in the bank account of the supplier, and there's no way that anyone can interfere. The CEO of finance or the CEO of the other department is the only person who would be responsible in ensuring that that transaction, gets to an end. If your comments to that are to the affirmative, then do you then see as a way that the auditor will, maybe the audit process will be faster, then you can actually be able to access it, like on a quarterly basis, and then allow us now to come in and then introduce the new amendments, which I'm hoping that my colleague and I, or rather this committee, can bring in the amendments to ensure that the Auditor General begins the audit 1st of July after the end of the financial year.
Okay, I think you can keep that as I ask mine, and then we conclude. There is two issues which are really a problem to devolution in this country. The first issue is the issue of late disbursement of funds to counties, where sometimes the national government takes up to 4 or 5 months before funds are disbursed to the counties. And you know the implication of that. It comes, creates pending bills, generates audit queries. We have seen so many audit queries related to that. Is this an area that you can consider prioritizing in terms of performance audit, so that we really find out where the problem is? Because my understanding is that the Treasury makes a decision on exchequer releases based on the income they get. They decide that pay so and so, pay so and so, and they leave out so and so. But the Constitution is very clear that whatever is generated nationally, 15% of that should go to counties without undue delay. But there is someone sitting in Treasury and maybe ignoring what is supposed to go to counties and prioritizing other things. And in that process, you find that counties have had to suffer. Some have had to borrow expensively from banks to be able to pay salaries and other things. And that also encourages corruption in counties. So is it an area that you can consider doing a performance audit to find out what is this process at Treasury in terms of how do they receive their exchequer and how do they release their exchequer, so that we don't keep everyone in a waiting mood. The Senate, every year, we pass a disbursement schedule to counties with a specific amount that will go to each county and the dates. But then someone there in Treasury decides to ignore all that and decides to prioritize other matters. So I think that's an area that maybe, Madam Auditor General, you can tell us whether it's an area you are considering key in your performance audit. The second area is the processes at the Office of the Controller of Budget. We have governors coming to stay in this city, CEC Finance coming to stay in this, Chief Officer Finance coming to stay in this city, just to chase their approvals. Approval of expenditure at the Controller of Budget. And now we are being told that the Controller of Budget has now decided to be doing the approval herself. She will go through massive files, going through it herself. And you find that now, money was delayed to come to counties. When the money has come, the counties want to spend, they cannot spend, because the Controller of Budget will take a week, a month to process the approvals. Is that an area that you are also considering to do a performance audit, so that we get to know what happens at the Office of the Controller of Budget? Why is it that the Controller of Budget has now decided to do the approvals, go through every file herself? So, because those are two issues that I find impeding devolution in this country. And if you did a good performance audit, then as a Senate, we'll be able to act on your report, and that would improve the way our counties receive money and the way approvals of expenditure is done by the Controller of Budget. So maybe you can...
Let me ride on your question, Chair,
Okay.
very quickly. Thank you. As we are concluding,
Yes.
I've noted the concern that you've really raised in terms of delayed disbursement, and putting in mind as a finance committee, we ensure that we are very timely. Now, then this, Madam Auditor General, then results to commercial loans by the counties. Then further to that, there's the issue, of course, of the audit. What's your take as far as this issue of commercial loans are concerned to the counties? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I just want to ride very fast on the COB, because I think that I've seen in my county of Migori it being a major issue. And I want just to narrow it down to a specific element of it. Because I don't want us to put the auditor in a question where that looks like there's that there's a tussle between the auditor and the office of the Controller of Budget, because the Controller of Budget under Article 228, I think Section 5 of that, or that's about Article 5 of that, is required to authorize only finances to counties as authorized by law. But I think that the question that I wanted to strengthen there, Auditor, is that they consider a budget, then there is a vote to it, and then there is procurement. Where I've observed the Control of Budget spending a lot of time, which then leads to a lot of delays, is in the consideration of procurement. So my specific question to this is, should the Control of Budget stop at the vote level and then approve, or should they extend to analysis of the procurement documentations? Or should the procurement documentations then remain a question of auditor at a time of audit? I think that's where I wanted to get clarity on in terms of the question that the Chair asked with regards to the COB delays.
That's right. Right. Auditor Chair, Auditor General, just a point here. You asked a question on commercial loans, and you've talked about a cost-benefit audit, and whether, and I'm sure you make recommendations, whether, because these loans that counties take, one, there's no public participation, especially commercial loans. When you finally get your remittance from the exchequer, you're then repaying loans with interest. And that gap is not accounted for. What have you advised counties to avoid commercial loans? I know that there are late remittances from Treasury at times, and counties end up getting overdrafts to pay salaries. And I think there's been a recommendation, and all governors have spoken to this. But shouldn't guidelines be given to stop counties from taking commercial loans? Because it is not fair to service providers. In the end, there's a shortfall merely because so much money has been used to pay interest of loans that are taken without a clear process. It's not clear how they take those loans, how they repay them, and what agreements they have with commercial banks.
Auditor, you can respond to that, and then after your responses, we'll stop there. No more questions. Proceed.
Thank you, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. Indeed, some of the comments and issues being raised would speak to the way forward for this committee to guide on how public resources should be managed or accounted for at the county level. So I take some of these comments as issues that this committee is discussing or debating, and in the final report we'll give a way forward or recommendations for improvements. I want to speak to pending bills, and I want to speak to the excuse, because I use it as an excuse, I say it's an excuse, that pending bills arise because there's delayed disbursement. Honourable Chair, if pending bills arise because there's delayed disbursement, then when the counties get their full disbursement in a subsequent financial year, total disbursement, then they should be able to clear those pending bills. Straight and simple. There should be a correlation between the pending bills at the end of the financial year, if, for example, it's 200 million, and the outstanding exchequer releases from the National Treasury, which should be equal to 200 million. If that is not there, if pending bills are more than the outstanding exchequer releases, then you have a problem of fiscal indiscipline. And this brings to the issue of who determines who to pay and when to void. I think you've seen in my reports these days, I'm even giving the number of voids in the IB, and the amount of money and the dates that is happening. If the controller of budget, and I'll now speak about the controller of budget, has approved a payment to a certain supplier and it has gone through the process, why should it be voided at the time of payment? Are they going to present the same outstanding bill to the controller of budget again for payment, or how are they going to handle it? If the controller of budget has authorized for full payment and they do partial payment, how will they request for the partial payment? So there's fiscal indiscipline at the counties, and there's fiscal indiscipline at some of the national government entities with regard to pending bills. However, there are those pending bills that arise because the fourth quarter exchequer releases their budget cuts, or we are given a communication by Treasury, including the audit office, and that's why I have come to this Parliament time and again to say ring-fence the funding of the Auditor General, create a fund that when I'm expecting to pay, like 2024, I crossed the year with a pending bill of 24 million and a few other extras, because the amount I was expecting for exchequer releases that was delayed and came in end of June was not adequate to clear all the pending bills, which means because I had not budgeted for pending bills in the first quarter, the same thing affecting other entities, and they're supposed to be a fast charge, and I try to adhere to the law, then it takes away my first quarter funds for audit services. So first, it's important that if you look at my county reports, you'll see a table these days on what was released in May, what was released in June, what was released in July, because we are receiving funding in July and we are backdating it to June as part of the expenditure process. But that funding that comes, if it comes in its entirety, counties get their full funding for the year. So they should not say they have pending bills that has been pending for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Because do you have any outstanding funding for counties for 2023, 22-23? We don't. Maybe we have to for 23-24. When we top up or we add up all the pending bills for all the counties, does it amount to the billions that are yet to be released for the last quarter? If it doesn't, then let's sort the problem from the source. Let's look at the root cause of the problems. Let's not allow people to say pending bills are a result of delayed exchequer releases, unless there's a direct correlation. Mine I can show, because I also receive funding from the exchequer, the direct correlation on my pending bills against what was not released as at end of June. So there are those issues specifically correlated, and there are those where it's pure fiscal indiscipline, people committing for projects and programs and recurrent expenditures beyond what is available. We are, of course, hoping that accrual accounting will help, because it means we can continue providing services and we don't rush at the end of the year and incur further expenditure and then we don't pay. We hope that will help accrual accounting so that we know the stock of pending bills. And Honorable Chair, pending bills now should be part of public debt. And I've communicated this to both the National Assembly and the CPA, the Honorable Kajwang's committee, that we have borrowed loans. You have talked about commercial loans, which you're concerned about. We have overdrafts. And now we are borrowing in kind. We have borrowed from our employees by deducting pensions and other statutory deductions and not paying. So we are borrowing from our employees because we are diverting those deductions for use for other operations. And now we are borrowing from the suppliers in kind. They provide us services, they provide us goods, we don't pay. So pending bills, in my next summary, I'll put it as part of public debt. And I think you saw in my last summary, I indicated that the public debt does not include the amount of pending bills. That was a forward notice. So let's look at the root cause of the issues, honorable members, to solve the issue of pending bills. We are still, even as we try to sort out the pending bills that have been in arrears for so long, we have not put in place measures to stop further incurrence. So we would have expected, if we have committees that are working on pending bills, or we are paying attention to these, that 2024, nobody should have crossed the year with a pending bill. 2025, no entity should cross the year with a pending bill. So let's tighten the controls. And again, failure to pay is an offense in the Public Finance Management Act. So I will stop there. That issue, it doesn't need a special audit because I've issued a report on pending bills for all counties, and I've issued recommendations and my audit findings. I've issued a summary, and my predecessor also issued the same. So how many times are we going to keep addressing an issue instead of providing a solution? The issue of control of budget, Honorable Chair, and people have also come to me to ask what the control of budget. I will just refer you to Article 228, Article 5, that the controller shall not approve any withdrawal from a public fund unless satisfied that the withdrawal is authorized by law. Who are these determining her level of satisfaction? It is her to determine. If it means she takes every file because she sees gaps within the process, which now she will improve on, that is her purview, under her purview. So it is her level of satisfaction, not others to come in and say, don't look at this document, don't, you're doing audit, you're encroaching. It is her to determine her internal operations. And I would wish you'd support her because she comes before me
She is the one who gives you the warning signals with her reports, which I have been saying committees must now discuss, the same way you're discussing the Auditor General's reports, because she gives you prior warning on a quarterly basis. And then I come in at the end of the year and I confirm what she was saying all along, that indeed it's true, that we have a problem. So if you take her reports and start discussing them and demanding accountability or requiring explanation, then when the entities come to you as you are prosecuting the Auditor General's reports, you will remind them, we discussed this issue when the Controller of Budget issued her report. And if we work seamlessly that way, we might see improvements, because they know that you will demand of that explanation at the end. The issue of guidelines and laws and amendment, yes, indeed, I am for amendment to the law that allows people to create funds left, right, and center. Maybe give a limit of how many funds or the amount of money or how many in a year, or that a fund should not duplicate the efforts of a department or another entity. And that will come from you, honorable members. You put in controls so that CEC finances don't wake up every day and decide we can use this money off the IFMIS or off the system by creating a fund, because that's what's happening. So, Honorable Chair, honorable members, that is under your purview to tighten those internal controls. And I've raised this even with the Public Accounts and Investment Committees in some of my submissions, that we need to control the proliferation of funds that are being created by counties, because they're also being used for mischief. Thank you.
Did I hear your response on late submission, late disbursement of funds to by Treasury? Whether or not you are considering doing a performance audit in that process?
Chair, we will look at it internally and we'll see whether there is need, or whether National Treasury's hands are also tied because they wait for KRA. You know, we'd have to start for how much is KRA collecting on a daily basis, what is the list of all the entities that have applied for disbursements. The law says that you have the disbursement schedule. Why is it not being adhered to? Is there any favoritism? Or what are their criteria in determining to give this one 10% of what they requested for and this one 100%, or even reallocation, where now supplementary 1, supplementary 2, everybody else is being told reduce your budget so that another entity can get more. So those are areas that can be looked at, and then we'll see whether there is need for a performance audit, or it can be part of the governance audit report within the National Treasury's report. Commercial loans, I think I addressed that with together with the overdrafts, that counties are resorting to commercial loans to fill the gap of exchequer releases. But nobody is asking, are counties improving on their own source revenue collection so that they stop relying on the exchequer? How much goes to, out of the total county budgets, if you're saying how much goes from the national government? And are we saying that the national government is the one that is running the counties through the shareable revenue? What have the counties done to ensure that they are sustainable? Because it means if the national government is not able to collect, and remember the national government is collecting from the entire country, which comprises of the same counties. If the national government is not able to sustain, especially when we're having economic downtimes, does it mean the counties collapse? Should we not all collectively cut back on our budgets and our expenditures and our operations until maybe the economy improves? Because everything relies on revenue collection. If you look at the budgets, and I hope, honourable members, you look at some of these budgets that counties prepare, they overextend themselves. Indeed, they start from the expenditure side, then they start filling in revenue. Even, I'm sorry to say, revenue that is not feasible. Though they feed in how much they'll expect from exchequer or national government as shareable revenue, then the balance is a figure that they balance and assume they will collect, which means they will never live to their budget. Then they commit those expenditures as if the funds are available. Remember, we are operating on cash basis. So it's not about the availability of the budget or the vote, it's about availability of the cash in time to provide this service. So that is where now the counties need to start paying attention to. Is the cash going to be available? And cash comes from revenue collection.
I think we will close, but maybe before you close, just closing comments by members. Briefly.
Thank you, Chair. For me, it's actually to really appreciate your office. Great support that you've always accorded this particular committee. And I believe the deliberations, the discussions we've been able to have also have opened up a lot. And moving forward, definitely we'll be able to look at the recommendations that you've also shared, your views. This engagement was very, very important because its goal is more of a win-win, and I believe we've been able to achieve a lot. Asante sana, and usipote sana pia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. I think just two things, Auditor General. Thank you, of course, for honoring this meeting with Senate. The topic on public debt is very important. And pending bills, and I'm glad that you have addressed it as required, pending bills, I think, need to be dealt with, and so that we get closure. Because one, as long as counties have a procurement plan and they know what they procure in the year, they would have a budget, and therefore there's no reason why in the end, if all funds are released as due, payment should not be made. But it gets worse usually, Auditor, when there's failure of payment, interest then accrues.
Na mtazamaji, ni kikao hicho ambacho kinaelekea kuisha, ambapo mhasibu mkuu wa serikali Nancy Gathungu alikuwa anahojiwa na kamati ya uhasibu wa bunge la Senate kuhusu matumizi ya fedha za serikali za county. Mtazamaji, tunatamatisha taarifa zetu kuu za sasa.